Today I want to talk about evaluating liver function, specifically using lab work. The liver is one of the most vital organs in the body. It eliminates toxins, it processes the entire bloodstream, pulls things out of the blood. It's also responsible for manufacturing proteins and fats, storing glycogen, which is an energy source. Bile comes from the gallbladder and the liver that helps aid in digestion and digest fats. A lot of our dogs and cats are suffering with simmering liver disease that we don't know is there because they're not showing symptoms. And a lot of times our first clue is that routine laboratory testing that is done at the annual exam or pre-op lab work, and you get some abnormal liver values, and then it's kind of like, oh my gosh, where did that come from? And it can come from a lot of different areas. Like I said, toxins that enter the bloodstream are filtered in the liver. So those can be environmental toxins like chemical cleaners, pesticides, herbicides, flame retardants that's on our furnitures and our carpets. Vaccines have to get processed as well. They have adjuvants, preservatives in them. A lot of medications that our pets are given are going to be filtered and metabolized by the liver, and so we can have elevated liver enzymes from damage to the cells from those chemicals, particularly a lot of the parasite preventative chemicals, heartworm prevention, and other over-the-counter or prescribed drugs. Processed foods filled with chemical additives, dyes, euthanasia solution. Yes, I did say euthanasia solution. It is found in a lot of highly processed pet foods. Viruses, viral infections of the liver, bacterial infections of the liver, mycotoxins, which are mold toxins. So there's been a lot of pet food recalls from grains that are infected with molds. When the molds die, we get the mold toxins released. Certainly cancer of the liver shunts, which is where the blood flow, instead of branching out like a tree as the blood vessels go through the liver, we have a garden hose straight through so the blood does not get filtered and detoxed. That would cause changes on the liver values as well on the lab work. And then certainly pollution, stress responses, inflammation, any other problems that are going on in the body autoimmune disease can also affect the liver. What are we going to look at? Well, we're certainly going to want what I recommend at your annual checkup for your pet, for dogs and cats, is to have a routine blood panel. So it's going to be a CBC, a chemistry screen, and a urinalysis. Don't leave out the urinalysis because we actually can see things that are going on with the liver show up on the urinalysis, whether there's crystals in the urine or bilirubin in the urine that can show that maybe we better look a little more closely at the liver. We're going to talk about some of the main liver enzymes that are on most blood panels. A lot of this information is in my book, Keeping Your Pets Naturally Healthy. There are chapters on all the different organ systems in the body, so there will be lab work descriptions for all the different organ systems throughout the book. We're going to focus today on the liver. The first one is ALT, which is also known as alanine aminotransferase. It's a liver enzyme that is found in the individual liver cells. And if the cells are damaged, then the ALT leaks out of the cells. Damage could be from trauma, could be from chemicals, could be from infection. Drugs, especially steroid-containing drugs and non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, the NSAIDs, commonly increase ALT values, also a lot of those chemical pesticides that we use. Anti-seizure drugs, particularly phenobarbital, can raise the ALT, and the amount of increase in the value can determine whether your pet should be able to take that type of medication. So it's my recommendation, if you have an animal with arthritis or pain and your veterinarian wants to prescribe a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug, you should start with a blood panel to make sure that the liver is functioning properly. And then after the pet has been on the drug for a few weeks, repeat that lab work, make sure that the liver and kidneys are tolerating the drugs. Certain diseases in the body can also increase ALT. Endocrine diseases are pretty much at the top of that list. Diabetes, Cushing's disease, pancreatitis, also inflammatory bowel disease, cholangiohepatitis, which is inflammation of the liver and the gallbladder and bile ducts, cancer, hyperthyroidism in cats, fatty liver disease, and severe muscle necrosis or dying off of cells due to trauma. So for instance, if you have a pet who has a big impact trauma, hit by car, falls off a ledge, something like that, and we have a lot of muscle damage, that can cause the ALT to go up as well. Second one is AST, which is aspartate transaminase. It's a liver enzyme also found within the cells. It's released when the cells are damaged. It's also found in muscle cells, so it's not as liver specific as the ALT. One time I went to the gym and worked out really hard for an hour and a half, then went and had my fasting lab work run afterwards. And when I got my lab results back, my doctor was freaked out and said I was in liver failure because my AST was quite elevated. I knew that AST also came from muscle cells. I knew that I had really overworked strenuously in the gym before having lab work run. So I went back the next week, didn't exercise beforehand, had perfectly normal values. Keep that in mind. If the ALT is normal but the AST is high, do you have an animal that is doing endurance, highly stressful activities? Don't get your lab work run right after doing that. Steroids are not significantly going to change the AST, so that can be a way to kind of tell, could steroids be causing that increase in some of the other values if the AST is still normal. So diseases that can cause AST elevation, a lot of those have to do with the muscle. So for instance, heart failure, that strenuous exercise, muscle necrosis or cell death, and primary liver disease. Next one is alkaline phosphatase. This is a group of enzymes found on the outer lining of the liver and the bile duct cells, and it can be elevated for a lot of different reasons. One of the main reasons that we see particularly in dogs is Cushing's disease. This one will go up very quickly and can be very high, and sometimes that's our first indicator on our lab work that, ooh, maybe this dog is working on an adrenal gland disease. But anything that obstructs bile flow, so bile duct tumor, cholestasis, which is where we get sludge in the gallbladder and in the bile ducts, can also cause an increase in ALK phos. Intact female dogs with pyometra, which is a uterine infection, the ALK phos will also go up with that. ALK phos is produced by the uterus, the bones, the adrenals, and the liver. So if we have osteomyelitis, which is a bone infection, that could also cause an increase in ALK phos. So osteosarcoma, cancer of the bones, could cause an increase in ALK phos. So if that's the only enzyme that we have that's elevated, then we've got to do a little more investigative work. Is it a female that's intact? Could it have a pyometra? Does this animal have symptoms of Cushing's disease? Should we be looking at the adrenal glands? Or does this animal potentially have a bone marrow issue? ALK phos sometimes will be a little bit elevated if you're having your pet spayed or neutered young, because they are actively growing and the bones are still growing. Sometimes the ALK phos will be slightly elevated in those animals, and it's just because they're a young animal with actively growing bones. Drugs, for sure, steroids and anticonvulsants will make this go up. That's why with Cushing's disease, the ALK phos goes up. It's because of the steroids being produced by the adrenal glands. So a lot of times when we have just an elevated ALK phos, we're going to need to do some more workup on the animal. GGT, gamma glutamyl transferase. I don't see this on all blood panels. I wish it was on all panels, but there are chemistries and then there are super chems, and the GGT sometimes is not on the regular chem, it's only on the super chem. GGT is found in the cell membranes of the bile ducts, kidneys, and pancreas. An increase can result from impaired bile flow, inflammation of the gallbladder, primary liver cancer, aflatoxin, that mold toxin, or other mycotoxins, and steroid-containing and anticonvulsant drugs. I remember an internal medicine doctor saying to me one time, if the GGT is elevated, we have active damage going on in the liver. This one is more worrisome even than the others. So I'm always looking at the GGT to see if that's really elevated, then I know we've got a liver that's really screaming at us. If elevated GGT is noted along with elevated ALK phos, the diagnosis of liver disease is 94%. If ALK phos is elevated but GGT is not, then look more for skeletal disease or pyometra, endocrine disease, something else causing that ALK phos to go up. Total bilirubin. In healthy animals, red blood cells are normally removed from the circulation when they get old, which is when they're about 2 weeks old. Once removed, they break down into several components, one of which is bilirubin. The bilirubin is processed in the liver and passed to the intestines as a component of bile. If we have too much bilirubin in the blood, it could mean that the red blood cells are being broken down too rapidly, for instance, autoimmune hemolytic anemia, or it could be a problem with processing and release of bilirubin in the liver. Accumulation of bilirubin in the tissues is what causes that yellow color that we see when animals become icteric or jaundiced. And the total bilirubin value has to be looked at in combination with other values in the body. So looking at the red blood cell count, looking at the urine to see what the bilirubin level is in the urine, and then also looking at the other liver enzymes to see where this is coming from. If GGT is also elevated along with the total bili, then you probably have a gallbladder or bile issue. Cholesterol, which will be labeled as CHOL. Cholesterol is made by the liver. High cholesterol in animals is not near as big a disease as it is in humans, where we worry about hardening of the arteries and all that stuff. But high cholesterol is commonly seen in dogs that have hypothyroidism. So if you haven't checked the thyroid levels and your dog has high cholesterol levels, then I would definitely get a thyroid panel. But it could be a sign of other endocrine diseases as well, like diabetes or Cushing's disease. If the cholesterol is very low, then we have to look at, is this animal undergoing starvation? Do they have cirrhosis of the liver, decreased liver function, hypoadrenocorticism, which is Addison's disease? So we don't want to see the cholesterol too low, because that's almost a more dangerous thing. We can get cirrhosis of the liver from long-term use of anticonvulsants like phenobarbital. So we really want to keep these drugs to a minimum and look for alternative ways to control seizures if at all possible, and maybe look to other drugs, anticonvulsant drugs. Albumin. Total protein is made up of albumin and globulin. The globulins are made by plasma cells in the bloodstream, and they're part of the animal's immune system. The albumin is made by the liver, and it makes up more than half of the total protein present. It serves in transport of bilirubins, hormones, vitamins, and drugs, and also calcium is bound to albumin. Albumin has an important role in fat metabolism. It binds fatty acids, keeps them in a dissolvable form in the bloodstream. If the albumin levels are low, the calcium levels are also going to be low, since they track together. Causes of low albumin could be severe liver disease, cirrhosis of the liver, could be maldigestion, where they're not absorbing enough nutrients for the liver to make the albumin. Liver shunt, this would be something that we would see would be that low albumin. BUN, blood urea nitrogen, sometimes you'll see it as SUN, serum urea nitrogen. If the liver has a shunt and is not functioning appropriately, we will get a low BUN. So if we have a low albumin, low BUN, low cholesterol, those are all signs of a small non-functioning liver. So it could be a shunt, it could be a cirrhosis of the liver, but there's not enough liver cells functioning. Serum bile acids is a specialized test where we take a fasting blood sample, we feed the animal a high-fat meal, and then we take another sample after the meal has been ingested, and we look at the level of the bile acids. If it's increased, again, that means the liver is not processing things, so it could be that we have a liver shunt, that we have severe liver disease going on, or a bile duct obstruction. That's kind of the quick down and dirty of the liver values that we commonly look at. If you want to dive deeper into this, we have a course called Understanding Lab Values. There's the big course that goes really in depth, which I highly recommend for veterinarians who might need to brush up on their lab review, or technicians who really want to be smarter about this so that they can really explain things in depth to their clients. But we certainly have a lot of pet parents who want that level of understanding. We also have Understanding Lab Values Simplified, which is sort of the easier course to get through for the pet parent who just wants to understand kind of what I ran through, but for each one of the lab values that you might see on that list of, I have no idea what this all is, that you get from your veterinarian. And by the way, every time you have lab drawn, get a copy. absolutely get a copy, keep it in the folder for your animal, whether it's a digital folder or a real folder, keep copies of everything. We also have a lab review. If you have lab work from your pet that you don't feel confident about the interpretation, you don't understand the interpretation that your veterinarian has given you, or you want more in-depth description of everything that's going on, we have a lab review where I will review your lab work and do a recording going through all the lab values and letting you know what I see and recommendations that I would make for further testing or maybe changes in the routine for the pet. Hopefully this helps.